Okay everybody, Tektalar here again with the 7th episode of the Heroes Appendix video series. Its purpose is to help newer and veteran players alike to fully understand the ins and outs of all the characters in Hero Wars Mobile. In today's video, we are reviewing the second place winner of the most recent vote amongst my patrons, and probably one of the most underappreciated tanks who wasn't quite underused like Luther, but she's definitely a tank you hate to see in the enemy's lineup. Aurora. She's one of the heroes that you get during Chapter 1 of Campaign, and a lot of newer players are familiar with her from ads for the game. Hopefully the video today will renew your confidence in her ability to tank in the current meta. In today's video, we are going to be discussing her skills, how they visually appear, and their uses both practically and strategically, when to use Aurora, when not to use her, her roles in the team, artifact priority, skin priority, and glyph stat priority. First up is Aurora's activatable skill, Crystal of Celius, which is commonly referred to as her ultimate because this is the ability she can use once her yellow energy gauge is filled during battle. Aurora raises her sword to the heavens and lets out a battle cry to strike fear into her opponents as a rainbow flash of light strikes the center of the enemy team, dealing damage to the whole team. The damage ratio for this skill is reasonably high at 50% magic attack, considering this is the value per strike and it hits all 5 heroes. Something to consider is that she's one of 2 tanks who has a truly offensive ultimate skill and that it has no real secondary utility effect, so that's why her damage output is reasonably high on this. You can consider how magic attack bonus artifacts can impact this. One maxed weapon can effectively double her damage. Aurora's second skill is called Crystalline Onslaught. Aurora will lunge forward and hide behind her shield as it grows in size until it bashes the opponent and stunning them for 3 seconds. This skill has a 40% magic attack ratio, which is again reasonably high like her ultimate, so for each magic attack buff active, this can nearly double the skill's damage when maxed. She also uses this on average after every 4 attacks, which is pretty frequent, so she's a great tool for disrupting the enemy front line if needed. Aurora's third skill is called Piercing Light, which deals damage at a 40% magic attack ratio to the whole enemy team that are standing in a straight line in front of her. Enemies split apart by your heroes may be unaffected if they're not on the same side of Aurora, meaning the left versus the right. This skill is represented by Aurora pointing her sword forward and shooting out a small white blast with a faint rainbow tail. Aurora's passive skill is called Rainbow Halo, which is truly what makes her unique as a tank and arguably one of the most formidable foes on the battlefield. This skill is identified by a rainbow-colored circle under her feet as well as a similarly colored semicircle light above her head. This shield will absorb 80% of all magic damage dealt to her, and it stores it in a shield, which is visualized as a white bar below her health bar during battle. This shield cannot be penetrated by magic penetration or anything like that, so she always mitigates 80% of magic damage. Once the shield is filled to capacity, which is 10% of Aurora's max health, it will fire off as a magic attack equaling 10% of her max health in damage, which will check magic penetration of Aurora against the magic defense of the opponent. The shield cannot store any overflow damage, which means once it's filled to capacity, the hit that brought it to its limit, any excess damage not mitigated will be dealt to Aurora in full. With that said, once the shield is consumed, it reapplies immediately to block the next incoming magic attack. So, this makes her particularly effective at warding off heroes who have multiple low-damage magic attack hits that hit numerous times, for example, Mojo's ultimate or Peppy's boldness skill. In this example, Aurora has 650,974 health, which means her shield capacity is 65,097, and Celeste's magic attack is 64,800, which means her basic attack should deal 63,360 magic damage since she fully penetrates Aurora's magic defense. Since Aurora's Rainbow Halo skill reduces damage by 80%, Celeste only deals 12,672 damage, and the remaining 50,688 is stored in Aurora's shield. This means Aurora's shield has only 14,409 health remaining, so on Celeste's next attack, dealing 63,360, Aurora's shield will absorb the remaining 14,409 to fill the shield and exploding, dealing the 65,097 damage. But since Celeste has over 26,000 magic defense and Aurora only has about 7,000 magic penetration, she'll only take a fraction of this damage. But then, since the shield cannot store overflow damage, meaning it will not create a new shield unless a new magic damage source strikes Aurora, the remaining damage, 48,951, hits Aurora in full since the shield expired. Let's take a deeper look now and see when you should be using Aurora. Number 1 is as your main tank. In the current meta, Aurora is borderline the best tank in the game. Do not take her lightly. Next up is if your opponents have magic users in general. So if a primary source of your opponent's damage is going to be magic, since Aurora mitigates magic damage so much, and if you partner her with healers and that kind of thing, it makes her near impossible for magic dealers to bring her down. Another time to consider using her is if your opponent is trying to use a blitz team, which is basically defined as a very high damage dealing team who burst in a short time at the beginning in an attempt to get to your backline. Now this is typically comprised of physical damage dealers, and the reason for that is because her primary mitigation stat is dodge. So with the ability to potentially mitigate 100% of that damage, which a lot of those teams, there is no real way to mitigate their damage. With her having the only ability that can do that, it makes her extremely valuable in an attempt to stop these teams. And then lastly, most specifically, if the enemy has a lot of single target frontline magic damage, including heroes like Celeste, Peppy, Kai, etc. If your Aurora has at least 1 to 2 healers, the enemies are never going to be able to get through her. Now we'll take a look at when you should be avoiding Aurora in your team. The first up is if the enemy damage dealer is Kira, seeing as her dodge artifact weapon isn't a guaranteed thing, and even if she dodges Kira's attack, it will still ricochet and hit your entire team. Whereas if you bring a hero that has an armor buff against Kira, which is really the best way to mitigate her damage, that is a guaranteed thing, and it is a way to protect your entire backline. The second time to consider not using her is if the enemy has a very high single target physical damage dealer, which include but are not limited to Ishmael, Elmir, Darkstar, Astrid and Lucas, Ginger, etc., and you're not planning to bring at least 1 to 2 healers. Reason being is because it's really kind of up to chance whether or not she gets hit by them or not, and if she does get hit, then her mitigation is out the window and they're going to bring her down pretty quickly. So if you have healers to offset that and bide more time to give her more opportunities to dodge, that would kind of eliminate the need to avoid using her here. And then lastly is just if another tank skill set would be more appropriate to win the fight. For example, needing Astaroth's Resurrect and damage share, Cleaver's Hook, Rufus's Magic Shield for the backline, Galahad's damage output, Chava's Swallow, etc. So overall, Aurora really doesn't have many scenarios where you really need to avoid using her. It's just more, opportunity where our other tanks better fits. Now we'll briefly discuss her roles in the team as they were just mentioned in the previous section. Aurora's main role is tank, obviously, with a guaranteed 80% damage mitigation from magic attacks and approximately 43% chance to dodge physical attacks when she's completely maxed. She's one of the hardest tanks to bring down in a swift and reliable manner. With that considered, she's borderline the best tank in the game, and could possibly cross that threshold soon. Another way you can utilize her is against mage teams by also having heroes who provide her with magic penetration, because she will become a very high damage dealer. Depending how much damage she's taking, she could be dishing out 65,000 damage hits every few seconds, and it's cleave damage, which means it can hit enemies that are close to each other. This is a great way to pin down Satoris who deal a lot of magic damage and stand just a little too close to the front line, and since his lifesteal effect is based on how much damage he deals, and she cuts it by 80%, he has a very hard time healing himself against Aurora as a tank. Next we'll discuss artifact priority order, which means which artifact is the most important to level up first. The first up is the artifact book, which will grant her 2,967 dodge and 53,394 health. This will ensure she's able to ward off additional hits from both physical and magical affinity opponents. Second up is her ring, which grants her 159,600 health and 3,990 physical attack, which is about 25% of her total health. And last in priority is her artifact weapon, Celius's Legacy. While the bonus dodge from this is very impactful for her and her teammates, she needs a base level of survivability first, which she gets much greater effect from her passive stats. In this segment, we'll be discussing her skins, which are relatively easy to obtain as far as the priority is concerned, which is good. The top priority skin is her Nordic skin, which offers 2,960 dodge, which is available for purchase with the skin scrolls and yields the largest boost to her survivability and is approximately 36% of her total dodge rating. The second in priority is her spring skin, which offers 106,645 health and is about 16% of her total health, which is available for purchase with skin scrolls, and it adds significant survivability as well as damage output potential from her Violet ability. The third in priority is her default skin, which offers her 54,600 health, which is about 8% of her total health, and 1365 physical attack, which adds additional survivability as well as damage output potential from her Violet ability. The fourth in priority is her devil skin. This is currently available as a grand prize through the Outland chests, where there is a very low chance you might pull a random skin from a select pool, including this one. It offers 10,650 armor, and even though armor is commonly a top priority for tanks, since Aurora doesn't get much armor, which is approximately 14,000 total, almost every damage dealer in the game can penetrate this even at maximum, so it's not worth wasting the resources in it early. Another thing to consider is if you keep this skin at level 24 or lower, a maxed out Martha will have more armor than her, and she will get Anvari's Violet skill shield instead of Martha, granting her additional physical and pure damage protection. In our final segment, we will now be discussing glyph stat priority. So what that means is which glyphs are the most important for you to upgrade first to yield the best results. The first glyph to choose is Dodge, which yields 1,120 dodge rating, which is approximately 14% of her total dodge rating. This grants her the most survivability early on, and can make her as close to the best tank she can be until her Violet skill unlocks. The second glyph up is Health. It gives 30,800 health, and since she gets very low health from equipment, this glyph is where most of her health comes from early on. The third glyph to choose is her Strength, totaling 22,400 health and 560 physical attack, which is next up in survivability for her. Fourth in priority is Magic Penetration, which gives 3,360 Magic Penetration, which is 48% of her total Magic Penetration. Since Aurora doesn't get much, it is almost mandatory to prioritize this over Magic Attack because she won't be doing much damage as it is, so the more you can penetrate, the better. Another thing to consider is if you're building Aurora very early on in the game, you could consider making this second in priority. Since her equipment gives a lot of magic attack, it would make her do decent damage. The fifth and final glyph to choose is her Magic Attack, which has 3,360 magic attack. There's not much to say about it beyond that. It will help her reach her peak magic attack, which does make her ultimate do decent pressure to low health damage dealers in the backline. Okay everybody, hopefully you found this video informative. If you do, please like, follow, and subscribe to my channel. Another thing to consider is recommending my content to your friends as well if you know they yearn for knowledge of the game. Since these videos are private, word of mouth is how they will get spread. Also, for a large and active Hero Wars community, join my Facebook group called Hero Wars Mobile Community the GOAT. The link will be in the video description. Thanks for watching.